Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining today's session, really focusing on how innovative tech can help corporations analyze and quantify climate risk as well as their broader ESG program. My name is Jamie Desai, Director of Strategy at OneTrust, that really helps organizations operationalize their ESG programs through a technology based approach. Now, when we think about ESG and really focusing on broader ESG and sustainability, it's really broken out into different components within an organization. A lot of times, the baseline is just understanding and generating the respective reports that you need across different standards. But more importantly than that, more so focusing on your organization's ability to track the respective metrics and KPIs and drive the initiatives that are important to your stakeholders. Now, when we think about ESG program management, it's not just the overall reporting component, but operationalizing the ability to intake the information across the respective stakeholders that you have, doing materiality assessments in a aggregated manner, and through technology, having that automated analysis that then drives the respective initiatives, whether that is associated to carbon, whether that's associated to human rights, et cetera, that your organization can easily track and monitor. Now, I mentioned carbon as well. Carbon accounting is a tough challenge for most organizations, depending on the vertical that you operate in, and almost impossible to do without technology. Again, it's not just understanding your overall carbon footprint as an organization. When we think scope one, scope two, and then even scope three in terms of your supply chains carbon footprint, but more importantly, as an outcome of that information, driving your overall offset initiatives for you as an organization to get to net zero. And again, utilizing technology to be able to automate both the intake of the information to determine your carbon footprint, and two, to drive the analysis and automated outputs of the best offset strategy as a whole. Now, this also translates to the overall sustainability and responsibility of your suppliers. At the end of the day, your credit is just as good as all of the third parties that you work with. And from that standpoint, assessing the overall sustainability and responsibility practices of each of the suppliers that you work with, utilizing technology to incorporate this on your onboarding process, easily sending this information out to do the intake. And as an outcome of that, even setting targets for your respective suppliers and tracking the performance of those targets over time to see if the supplier is working towards them or not. And for investment firms, managing this not only from a supplier standpoint, but their overall portfolio and having the ability to report on their portfolio's overall ESG landscape as it reflects on them as a venture capitalist or a private equity firm. And lastly, again, thinking about the full breadth of ESG, focusing on your overall environmental health and safety. Again, having the ability to automate the assessments that you do, the audits that you may do in regards to the respective uh, entities, as well as the different locations that your organization operates on. Having the overall incidents where any of your respective employees can actually flag those incidents. Again, from a end-to-end ESG program, then not having each of these in silos, but through one singular integrated platform that allows for all the data sets to be straightforward and simple for your organization to then report on. And technology is only as good as the content that goes into it and what drives the technology from the background. What I mean by that is having research that goes into how the technology should operate in terms of the new regulatory changes. Outside of just what is the actual regulatory change, how does this impact the report that I create within program management? What does this mean in terms of my carbon footprint and the reporting that I need to generate from that standpoint? With new regulations, for example, the German Supply Chain Due Diligence Act, what does this mean in terms of what I need to assess across my different suppliers? And again, report on that. So having that regulatory policy research all incubated into the platform, and then having analysis and actionable insights that then drive those respective actions. So I know I covered all of that at a very high level, but again, when we think about technology, one of the hardest challenges of creating your standards-based reports is really just the data collection. So really focusing on streamlining that data collection for your reporting needs Again, automating that through technology, whether it's collection from your stakeholders or if it's collection through different technologies that you use today that houses that information. And from that standpoint, instead of aggregating and manually generating your reports, utilizing technology to then auto populate those respective reports across the different frameworks and ratings that are pertinent to you. And over time, tracking the metrics back to the respective initiatives that you generated for those respective reports and monitoring that progress over time from a overall real-time dashboard perspective and ensuring that if you use technology, all of that information remains evergreen and you always know the posture of your ESG program. And at the end of the day, when it comes to generating those reports, it's not just about generating those reports, but utilizing that information and the analytics to prioritize the respective initiatives of your organization and take action. Again, conducting those materiality assessments to be able to engage across your respective stakeholders. In addition to that, prioritizing your environmental and governance initiatives and benchmarking those metrics that you've set and tracking those across the different goals and targets that you wanted to maintain. And utilizing technology to then train and communicate your partners and stakeholders as an outcome and driving actions across those respective workflows and having that task management for each of those respective initiatives. And lastly, ensuring that you're driving an informed ESG and sustainability strategy. So, again, if you have the ability to pull in all of this content and use that within the technology to translate to your organization's overall ESG program, having that policy framework research, the regulatory changes and updates, as well as the industry compliance requirements that then help drive those actionable insights, having AI powered recommendations for what your organization should focus on, and having those up to date frameworks as well as contextual alerts within your organization. Now, from a carbon standpoint, when we think about a transition to a net zero company, really one, capturing the information to get your climate footprint analysis, having those respective reports, and then actually taking action and having those carbon accounting standards pre-configured so the reports are out of the box ready for you to then generate, simplifying it, utilizing the technology itself. And again, customizing any of your emission reduction solutions, making sure that it fits kind of the brand of your organization in terms of the offsets that you're focusing on or do. And lastly, it's not just carbon, but then managing your waste and water, as well as your biodiversity and land use, as well as hazardous materials, to be able to capture the sustainability of your organization. And as mentioned, your reputation is just as good as the third parties that you work with. So ensuring that you're reducing your reputational risk with the sustainable supply chain. Again, when we think about that sustainable supply chain, having the ability to assess those respective suppliers for both their sustainability and responsibility as an outcome of their responses by using technology rather than you having to manually review that information, having risks that are automatically identified as well as opportunities with your respective suppliers that you can then work through and mitigate. And then also setting and tracking sustainability targets for your supply chain. And from that standpoint, comparing, creating the respective scorecards and reporting on them over time to really increase transparency and trust. And for those of you that are investment firms, doing the exact same thing when it comes to your overall portfolio. Again, lots of technologies are used just to manage the finances of those portfolios. In a very similar way, it's just as important data in terms of the sustainability and responsibility of the companies that you invest in. So, again, utilizing technology to automate the actual data collection and then centralizing your GHG emissions monitoring to really manage the carbon intensity of your portfolio. And again, gaining insights and performance and having analysis into the respective third parties that you work with in the exact same way that you would from a financial analysis standpoint, and having those science based targets on a portfolio level for your organization to focus on.